Good evening. The Planning Commission meeting of August 16, 2023 is called to order. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, and AT&T Uverse, Channel 99. Meetings are also streamlined live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendale.ca.gov/live.com, youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Planning Commission agenda are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Crochin is absent. Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Manassian?
Here.
Commissioner Shabazian? Here. And Chair Fuentes?
Here. Report regarding posting of the agenda.
The agenda for the August 16th, 2023 regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission was posted on August 9th, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Item 3, approval of minutes. We are gonna hold this for our next meeting because there's only 2 of us here, so. Item 4, oral communications. I don't have, is there anybody here for oral communications? I don't have any cards. Item 5, board commission member comments. Any comment? Any comment? Yeah, I have one FYI or announcement. The Filipino-American Business Association of Glendale, in collaboration with the City of Glendale's Community Development Department, Planning and Zoning, and Building and Safety, will be holding a 2-part workshop on accessory dwelling units in Glendale. So the first workshop will be on tomorrow, actually, Thursday, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., and it will be at the Glendale's Adult Recreation Center, 201 East Colorado Street. This is the center just next to the Central Library. So anybody interested in accessory dwelling units, please come join us. It's open and free to all. And our workshop presenter will be our very own Kristen Asp, Principal Planner. So I think we will have a lot of information coming from her. The second workshop will be on Thursday, September 21st, the same time, 6 to 7:30, and the same location. So if you would like to know a little bit more about applying for accessory dwelling units in Glendale, please join us. Thank you very much. Okay, old business?
We have none.
Nothing? Okay, new business. Item A, staff, you can read the description.
Item A is for 801 South Chevy Chase Drive. It's a wireless telecommunications facilities permit, case number PWTF 001621-2023. And good evening. Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public, I'm Cassandra Pruitt. I'm the case planner for this project. It's a new wireless facility application for 801 South Chevy Chase Drive. And I'll pull up a presentation here.
Cassandra, let me just quickly go through the procedures of the meeting.
Okay.
Planning staff will give an overview of the project. The applicant or the applicant's authorized representative will be asked to come forward stating both name and address and interest in the project. He or she will have 5 minutes to present the project. The commission may ask questions at this time. Others in support of or in opposition to the project will be asked to come forward, again, clearly stating both name and address. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make any closing comments and will have 2 minutes to speak. The hearing will be closed and the commission will discuss the project among themselves and render a decision. Commission members may ask questions of anyone, but there will be no debate or further comments taken. The commission may entertain staff's comments and recommendations during its deliberation prior to making a decision. Go ahead, Cassandra.
Thank you. So the project is located in South Glendale near Adams Square, and the site occupies the city block between South Adams Street, South Chevy Chase Drive, East Windsor Road, and East Garfield Avenue, as shown by the red polygon on this slide. In the lower right map on this slide, it shows the zoning, which is multifamily residential on the subject and surrounding, all of the surrounding sites. The application proposal is to establish a new wireless facility on the rooftop of an existing 2-story, 100,000 square foot medical office building. The 8-foot tall equipment will be in 4 locations on the rooftop, and the resulting equipment height of 53 feet exceeds the code allowed building height of 36 feet. However, the existing building is already 45 feet tall. The equipment is exceeding the allowed height because the technical requirements for the signal to reach the desired distance and be effective cannot be met without being located at the top of the building and away from the building edges. The site plan shows the equipment in relation to the property boundaries. The red line indicates the property boundary, the blue line indicates the building outline, and the yellow boxes indicate the proposed wireless equipment. As can be seen on this slide, the equipment is set back far from the property boundaries, specifically over 57 feet from Windsor Road to the north, over 170 feet from Garfield Avenue to the south, and then hundreds of feet from the east and west property boundaries. This slide shows the location of the equipment as it relates to the roof lines. The red line indicates the building outline, the blue line indicates the rooftop parapet, and the yellow boxes indicate the wireless equipment. As you can see, the 3 antenna locations are at the edge of the parapet, but are still set back from the building facades by at least 11.5 feet, and going up to 22 feet and 7 inches. On the elevations, the proposed equipment is shown by the gray boxes along the rooftop. As you can see, there is already other rooftop equipment, so the proposed facility marginally increases the apparent height of the building. The proposed equipment also features boxed shapes, which is consistent with the boxed shapes features all across the facade design and the building form. These are the east and west elevations showing the same points just mentioned on the previous slide. The equipment will be screened by 8-foot tall equipment screening, which will match the color and texture of the existing building exterior finish material. These elevation simulations show the existing conditions without the equipment at the top of the slide, and then the proposed condition with the equipment at the bottom of the slide. To the extent possible, the equipment is integrated into the existing architecture in terms of form and material. In terms of the facility being necessary to close a significant gap in coverage, Dish Wireless, who is the applicant, is a new wireless carrier and currently has no sites providing coverage in Glendale and the surrounding areas. This site is part of the initial coverage deployment as mandated by the FCC. So this is the site without any equipment, or the area. And then this is what the coverage would look like with this new proposed facility. This slide shows the build-out of their future network. The findings of fact are summarized on this slide, and as detailed in the staff report, they've been demonstrated to be met. As shown on the prior slides, the facility is set back far from the property lines and building edges, is architecturally integrated into the building to the extent reasonably feasible, and is sited as necessary to achieve the technical requirements of the facility. There doesn't appear to be any reconfiguration or relocation of the facility that would increase compatibility with the community. As shown on the coverage maps, the facility is necessary to address Dish's gap in coverage, and the applicant has provided a statement of willingness to co-locate on the site with other carriers. The facility is not anticipated to generate noise in excess of the city's maximum allowed noise level, but a condition of approval has been recommended to ensure the facility complies with the city's noise ordinance. Additional conditions of approval are recommended to ensure the facility operates compatibly with the community. The applicant asserts that the facility complies with state and federal regulations. No public comments were received either by phone or email. And therefore, based on the information just presented, the staff recommendation is to approve with conditions, with the standard conditions of approval typical for wireless facilities, and then with a 10-year expiration date that is standard for new wireless facility applications. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
I have one question. This is only for my knowledge. On the requirements for the application, on the bottom it says comments. The applicant has met the Bureau's review requirements. However, no copies were provided of FCC authorization for the permits and all that stuff. It's just that we give the applicants benefit of the doubt. I know this is a big company, but this is something that it's common practice that we do that.
Yes, actually, the applicant did subsequently provide those certificates. I just wasn't able to get a revised form from the department because the person was out of the office for an extended period of time, but we did get those forms.
Okay. Any other questions?
No questions for me.
Good. I have one speaker card. Alex Chaturov. Come forward. State your name and address.
Alex Zadorov for Dish Wireless. We're the project managers and engineers and consultants on the project. My address is 12526 High Bluff Drive, San Diego, California. I just want to thank staff for their support on this project. We've been working pretty closely over the last couple of weeks and months on this project. First, I'd like to kind of give you kind of history, tell you about Dish Wireless. Dish Wireless has been in business for about 40 years. They started out selling satellite services. They are a publicly traded company under the ticker symbol DISH. Dish Wireless is part of the T-Mobile Sprint merger. The FCC is encouraging competition at a federal level, and so there were certain conditions as part of that merger. One of those conditions was the federal government wants to encourage competition. There's the three big players, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon. So Dish is the fourth nationwide carrier, essentially as part of that merger. As part of that, the FCC has mandated that Dish deploy its network licenses and frequencies, and they've set certain thresholds. We've met the first threshold, which is to cover 70% of the United States by June 2023. And Dish has invested $30 billion in doing that. The next threshold is June 2025 to cover 75%. That's going to be the hardest part. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here today. The purpose of this project is to provide initial coverage to the area. Just to be clear, this is not an upgrade from 4G to 5G, 3G to 4G. We have no services in Glendale right now. So this is part of the initial rollout. It's called the Greenfield Network Build-Out. So we're investing money and time and engineering to comply with the city code. And that's really the objective of why we're here today. In doing so, our objective is to meet the design criteria and also take into consideration feedback from the community. We did send out public notices to the surrounding neighborhoods. I've offered myself as a representative if anyone had any questions or comments on the project. To date, we haven't received anything. So just really quickly about the height variance, I want to point out that even though this building is zoned residential, it has been and continues to be used for commercial purposes. So it's a non-conforming use currently as it is. Right? It's used for commercial medical offices, and there's no residential use on the property, even though it's zoned that. Right? Also to the south, there's another wireless facility that we looked at the Glendale at 1122 East Garfield. That's also same zoning. There's an existing wireless facility. We evaluated some alternatives. Our goal is always to co-locate on existing buildings with wireless facilities or towers, but there's just not enough infrastructure for this rollout that Dish is doing, right? And so being that this is in a densely populated residential area, we evaluated some alternatives. We looked at the school, we looked at the commercial building with the existing wireless facilities. We could not secure a lease there, right? So we have to start from somewhere, and this is where we're starting. So we evaluated alternatives, and we ended up here. This is the best option currently, even though the height limit's 36 feet, as planning staff has mentioned. The top of the existing penthouse is 45 feet, right? There's some other mechanical equipment on the roof that's actually at 53 feet. We did a 1A survey to capture that. So really, if you're looking at it, our equipment, it's an 8-foot increase over the penthouse, so it's not gonna stand out, as you can see on the photo simulations. We tried our best to integrate it, and the reason that we need this extension for the variance is because we looked at attaching the antennas onto the penthouse walls, and the signal, just how far the penthouse is set back, and the drop in the we call it the rad center, or the center line for the antennas. We ran some propagation patterns to see how much population we can cover, how many users in the surrounding area. And it's a significant drop. I'll just give you some quick statistics on that. At 50 feet, which is what we're proposing for our antenna center line, we're covering about 25,000. If we drop that down to 33 feet, which would be within the threshold for the height limit, it drops down to 5,000. So what does that mean? It means we need more sites in Glendale. We don't want to do that, right? So again, these are all engineered specifically to meet the objectives, but also take into consideration there's time, cost, and a lot of things to consider to deploy lots of little sites. So I want you to kind of consider that as part of this project. We're not doing this because we absolutely want it. We've evaluated the alternatives. It doesn't work. And this is the minimum height that we need. Okay. So that's briefly about the project. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, good. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. I have one question. So we looked at a map that showed the coverage, and then there was a second map showing your plan, the plan of the company, and how much you guys are planning to basically cover throughout the area. I'm just curious to know how far along that plan is, because we're looking at this first antenna. It says portion of Glendale. I'm just curious to know what that plan is.
So, a good question. As far as the plan, we currently are we don't have anything on air right now in the surrounding area in the city of Glendale. And so this is part of the initial rollout. There's other sites planned, as you could tell, within. Some of those are going to be co-locations on existing towers. Some of those are going to be on other rooftops, right, if there's no infrastructure there. I can't answer that question where the rest of the sites are, because we're not working on all the sites in Glendale. But I can tell you specifically for the city of Glendale, our client has informed us there's no sites currently that are transmitting on air.
Currently, no timeline on when that expansion is going to be.
As soon as possible, as soon as we get through this process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No questions from me.
I will entertain a motion. Oh,
You have to.
okay. They have a card. Okay, why don't you come forward and then fill out the card later on? Just give me your name and address for the
My
record.
name is Salpi Jagatspanyan. I live at 1119 East Windsor Road Street, across the street from the hospital, the offices. And I'm worried. I got the notice. I'm worried about the radiation, about health issues, because it's like literally when I'm sitting on my porch or in my bedroom, I will be seeing them. And so are others. They couldn't come, some of them because they cannot speak English well, and they are all worried though. My understanding is the building, I mean, they will do whatever they need to do. The other side of the building, it's the Glendale Community College and no residential area. This side on Windsor Road, across the street, there are all houses, even though they count it commercial, but it's not commercial, it's residential. For us, it's residential. We are all family living there. There are children, there are old elderly people. How this will affect us? And how can the city protect us from the harm? I don't know who to ask the question.
I can share a little bit of information to address that concern. Unfortunately, that issue is out of the city's purview. The environmental effects of the radio frequency emissions they're only under the purview of the federal government. So the city isn't allowed to look at or review that issue, unfortunately.
But can't the city ask them to put to install the towers to the other side of the building, to the other edge that doesn't come to our, not our side, Windsor side?
The application has specific findings of fact, is what they're called. They're specific issues that the applicant needs to address, which is, I summarized them on a previous slide. Those are the only issues that we're really allowed to review and make sure that the applicant addresses. We wouldn't be able to require them to move it to another site to address any environmental effects, since that is regulated by the federal government only and not by the local government.
Okay.
And if the city attorney has any additional information to add,
Yeah.
but
Thank you very much, Will. Yeah. Would you like to?
If I could speak Armenian.
Oh, we have translators here.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
translate. Yes.
I'm speaking, but not that well.
Just come to the microphone and give me your name and address for the record.
Vagan Makartishan. Of course, it's Vahan, but the Russians didn't have H. They put G. I turned into Vagan. Okay. Let's go in Armenian. Իմ հարցը այսպեսին է։ Նույն հարցերը, որ ինքը տվեց, բայց դեկին ասում է, որ սիթին չի կարող այդ հարցերին հոգա եւ պետք է որն ընդհանուր ամերիկան հոգա։ Այդպես բան չկա։ Եթե որ առաջարկել է ինժեներինգը դնի այդտեղ, սիթին թույլ է տալիս, սիթին պետք է իրան հարցում անի։ Ճիշտ է ասում է, որ պրոջեկտում բացատրեց ինչ-ինչուց կլինի, բայց էլի ժողով ինչ եք այդ թողտա տվել մեզի, որպեսի կանչեք մեզի, ասեք ձեր մտահոգությունը, մեր մտահոգությունը։ Մերն էլ նայր, որ ստիկին ասեց, ազդելու է մեր առողջության, մեր երեխաների, մեր թորների առողջության վրա։ Հիմա ոնց կարող է պատահի, սիթին նրանց թույլ տա ինչ ուզում են անեն, բայց չկարողանա այդ հարցը պարզի, թե ինչքան ազդեցողություն է թողնել, կարելի է թե ոչ։
Let me translate. I'm just going to exactly translate, or try my best to exactly
you.
translate. His concern is exactly the same as the lady that we just had.
Next door neighbor.
They are concerned about the health of folks living in the building across. And just curious if the city, very similar, if the city could get involved in the decision.
Yeah.
Yes,
Dr.
sure.
Banga?
Outcome, the city can involve to let them do anything they want, to not answer them how effective is to the health of the people, kids, grandkids living there.
And I think.
You are
yeah.
authority to ask them to find out and figure out how effective it is. Is it that strong, is gonna affect our health or not, if it's allowed or not? Of course, I used to live in Fontana, where a new area, they wanted to build a huge post with antennas, wireless. We wrote, of course, opposite side of me was living an American guy, which was working with NASA. He wrote down a letter, we signed it out, and still we couldn't do anything. They put that huge, like this big post, and put anything they wanted to. We couldn't do anything. But here, it's very close. That one was a little bit far from residential, but this one is very close to us.
Speaks good English.
I know.
That's good, but not that bad.
Well,
I was wondering, I couldn't. Okay. Now, the city could find out if it is it's bad for our health, do something the other way. They can change whatever they do. I don't know. I don't know how effective it is.
I have a question.
Find it out. Thank you.
okay, thank you very much.
I know, Cassandra, you would try to explain why the position of those antennas, you consider certain factors to be placed there. Their request of having it away from the residential area and then facing the GCC, what was the issue there again?
Let me pull up the site plan just so we have a bit to go along with it.
Is your microphone?
Or you could address that.
So I could touch on that just briefly. Staff is correct. The federal government does kind of prohibit local jurisdictions from considering the safety and all that other stuff, right? We did provide a EME report by a third-party engineer, which is available to the public, which shows that we're well in compliance, and it shows you the propagation patterns. It's safe, right? And that report is available to the public. It's part of the report that staff has prepared.
I understand that part. Said if they feel a little safer by having it, and it's just not the same building, but moving it a few feet, does that really affect your communication abilities or transmission abilities?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I think I should. Did you հասկացաք իր պատասխանը? I just want to ask them, make sure they understand. Իրանք ասում են կենտրոնական պետության requirements and բայց report ունեն իրանք, որ որևէ վնաս չի հասնի ժողովրդին։ Եթե report-ը պետք է կապին կարող են staff ասենք պատրաստ են դեզի տան։
That will be better if we have the report.
Okay, we don't want to carry a
The report that he was mentioning, EME report.
God forbid something happens, we
Okay.
know what to do,
Okay.
what step to take.
And I'm so sorry, but if someone's speaking, we have to ask you to come to the microphone because everything has to be recorded and videotaped.
Well, we're
so.
not going to go back and forth on the
Exactly.
same
I would-
issue.
I would
I think
suggest that.
Cassandra already answered it regarding the federal regulations, and I'm very familiar with telecommunications facilities. They're all over,
Mm-hmm.
and health issue is not one of the topics to be discussed here. So,
If the applicant,
Cannot have a copy
yeah, not the
after.
city. We're not in a position to discuss health issues in here. Thank you, Salpi.
if she provides her contact information to me, I can get that report
Yes.
sent to her afterwards.
Would you please,
Yes.
give them some information?
Okay, I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Can you
you. And-
ask him to fill out one more?
Correct. And if
Thank
the
you very
gentleman,
much.
if the gentleman can fill out one of the speaker cards as well, that would be.
Okay, so at this point, I'm closing the public hearing portion, and I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, I move. If somebody seconds it.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay. Moved and seconded.
Yeah, I moved by Chang Lee, seconded by Commissioner
Minasian.
Minasian, that upon review and consideration of, okay, I had a mic off. Moved by Cheng Li, seconded by Commissioner Minasian, that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of a current record relative to wireless telecommunications facility case number PWTF 001621-2023, located at 801 South Chevy Chase Drive, and after having conducted a public hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby approves wireless telecommunication facility PWTF-001621-2023 in accord with the findings and conditions set forth below.
Okay.
Roll call?
Roll call, please.
Fuentes? Chair Fuentes? Oh, I say yes. Okay.
I'll say yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Manassian?
Yes.
Commissioner Shabazian?
Yes.
Chair Fuentes?
Yes,
Thank you.
again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. 7B, under new business.
You don't mind?
Yes.
Switching, okay.
And that way she can obtain the contact information.
Oh, yes.
Do you all have the resolution in case?
I have it here somewhere. Okay. Yeah, it's at the end, I think. Thank you. If you have an extra copy, I'll take it. If not, then keep it.
Thank you very much.
Is that an extra copy? Okay, so I don't have to go back and forth. Thank you. She's a happy baby. She turned 7 months today.
Oh my goodness, oh my God.
I can't even believe it.
Right.
They keep telling
Yes.
you, but I.
Okay, we're
Chair-
ready.
Chair Fuentes, Planning Commissioners. The next item on today's agenda would be the Tropico Transit-Oriented District Zoning and Objective Design Standards. We bring these to you after several years of preparation and staff due diligence, and we are very excited to have you consider this. Just wanted to briefly give you an overview because your charge this evening is to review the proposed amendments and to make a recommendation to City Council whether or not to approve the Tropico Transit-Oriented Development District Zoning and Objective Design Standards, or provide comments as well, which we would then relay to City Council, or obviously, hopefully it will not be a recommendation for denial. Project includes a general plan land use map amendment, a zoning text amendment, and this would be for the new Tropico TOD zoning chapter, as well as updates to the different zoning chapters throughout with regards to the TOD zone, and the zoning map amendment for the new zone. Okay. And it is now, oh, there, okay. So the Tropico area itself is located in the southernmost portion of the city. It's adjacent to the Glendale Transit Center and the Los Angeles City Atwater Village border. It's always been defined by its proximity to high-quality transportation and its mix of industrial, commercial, and a few residential uses. You'll note that the area is bisected by San Fernando Road, running northwest to southeast, and also by Central Avenue, running north and south, and Las Feliz Avenue, running east to west. So the narrower side streets feature smaller lots that are perpendicular between San Fernando Road and Gardena, with West Cerritos Avenue terminating at the Glendale Transit Center, pictured before you on the screen. Here is a map from the Tropico Center plan showing the various streets, highlighting the outline of Tropico area. The Glendale Memorial Hospital is highlighted in blue. You'll note that the Brand Boulevard of Cars is highlighted in aqua. A number of more recent high-density residential projects are delineated by sort of the salmon color. And you'll note that the bus routes are located along San Fernando Road, Central Avenue, and Brand Boulevard, as well as Glendale Avenue. A little bit of background. Planning efforts began from a Metro grant for the Tropico area. Again, since it's close to the Glendale Transit Center. That Metro grant resulted in the Tropico Center plan, which is a neighborhood level policy plan that included recommendations to promote transit and support pedestrian-friendly transit-oriented development. Back in 2018, Council adopted the Tropico Center plan, initiated preparation of the zoning to implement the Tropico Center plan, and also certified the final environmental impact report for the South Glendale Community Plan as one package. Note that City Council did not at the time adopt the South Glendale Community Plan, but they obviously initiated all work for Tropico. So, as part of the 3 amendments, the first being, what is the overview? What is the general plan, the high-level plan? So this involves making sure that the general plan is consistent with the zoning. In this case, the current land uses for the Tropico area are community services commercial, highlighted in purple, and the mixed-use zone, which is highlighted in light blue. Again, mixed use calls out for the intended commercial, industrial, and residential land uses located along the city's major arterials, and it includes a reference to urban centers, which I'm going to talk about just briefly in the next slide, and it allows for densities up to 100 dwelling units per acre. So those are basically the densities that you see before you in the existing or recently constructed multifamily and mixed-use residential developments. Just also to note, and this before you also, the slide shows you, and this is an excerpt from the Tropico Center plan, the area itself was intended as an urban center, and this would be part of the South Glendale Community Plan. Urban center being the high-density mixed-use center served by regional and local transit with improved bus stops, wide sidewalks, and street trees. Urban centers have freeway access. Primary access is by major and minor arterials. So if this sounds familiar, it somewhat is because it's very similar to what we have currently in the mixed use. For that reason, and because right now the South Glendale plan has not been adopted, and the land use element that is currently in the process of being comprehensively amended does not yet include the South Glendale community plans and land use designations, staff is proposing to just amend the general plan land use map to have all of the area highlighted as mixed use. So the map that you see in front of you, the purple would be gone. It would be all mixed use. The mixed use, again, would be under the intended, mix of commercial, industrial, and residential land uses located along city's major arterials, in addition to the urban center reference, with densities up to 100 dwelling units to the acre. This would be consistent with the intent of the South Glendale Community Plan and with the Tropico Center Plan. We'd also like to note that the existing land use designation would not be changed whatsoever. This would purely be a land use map amendment. Okay. And I believe Ms. Van Meiden would like to comment?
Yes. Commission, members of the commission, commission chair, I just wanted to add that it is consistent with the general plan land use designation, an important component of the consistency that we're looking at in order to make this recommendation for the map. That's it.
Thank you for pointing that out. Staff had a number of other comments in the staff report with regards to existing land use designations for the area of the Glendale Memorial. There's been a little bit of inconsistencies showing it being public, semi-public, and that's been corrected. And so just to continue on, everything in the staff report is very well detailed in regards to the actual existing land use designations and the proposed land use designations. So with that said, we'd like to move on to the proposed zoning text amendments. So here you have the general plan. We're proposing the mixed-use designation. Now we're getting into the zoning, the implementation of that. In this case, staff is proposing a brand new chapter, which would essentially be called the Transit-Oriented Development Zone, the TOD zone. That chapter would feature the same key sections as right now we have in all of our other zoning chapters, which would include a land use table, development table. In this case, it's kind of unique simply because we are incorporating objective design standards. Right now, aside from the downtown specific plans, none of the other zoning chapters, such as residential or commercial or mixed-use chapters, feature objective design standards. So this would be very distinct and unique for this particular area. And these chapters, I'm going to go into the various nuances for these objective standards, but this staff has designed this chapter so that it fits within the existing zoning code, but then it incorporates these new sections that are much more graphically heavy versus words that are currently used in our zoning code, and the illustrations are emphasized over the text. So we try to make sure that it's user intuitive. Going back just briefly to the overarching proposed zoning map amendment, the diagram or the map on the left shows the existing zoning, and the map on the right shows the proposed TOD zoning. Just as a brief overview, the Tropico Transit-Oriented Development Project was presented to City Council back in September of last year. So we presented an overview of staff's proposals at that time. We also took these proposed zoning and objective design standards to the Design Review Board in December of last year. So what you're seeing before you is essentially the culmination of the City Council's and the Design Review Board's comments, and obviously proposed in one package before you today. Just to continue on, with the Tropico TOD zoning districts, again, the existing zoning would be C3, which is Commercial Services Zone, and the C3, which is highlighted in red, allows for residential development, and it's in compliance with the R1250 standards. It also, the existing zoning includes Industrial Commercial Mixed-Use Zone, which is the IMU. It includes IMUR, which is the Industrial Commercial Residential Mixed-Use Zone, and then also the SFMU, which is the Commercial Residential Mixed-Use Zone, which we sometimes shorten for SFMU, San Fernando Road Mixed Use. Both the IMUR and the SFMU allow for residential development up to 100 units to the acre. And last but not least, there's a little section that is also commercial auto-oriented. So in the proposed transit-oriented district, you have two new zones, TOD1, TOD2. TOD1 is the commercial, industrial, and mixed-use district, and those would be for the portions that are currently zone C3, CA, and IMUR, and SFMU. And then you have the TOD2, and this would be the hospital zone. So it focuses primarily on the existing hospital and hospital-related type uses. And this area is currently zone C3, which again allows for multifamily development, but according to the R1250 standards. This next map highlights what the colors of the zoning maps would be. You would see the TOD1 highlighted in a purple with the hatch marked areas highlighted and identifying the TOD2 districts. TOD1 would allow densities up to 100 dwelling units to the acre, a height of 60 feet. And again, this would be a little bit of an increase for the portions that are currently zone C3, which currently has a density limit of 43 units to the acre. But this was already discussed and approved by City Council back in their September presentation of last year. Now, TOD2 This would be TOD1 again. Now, TOD2, which is the hospital zone, which would also allow for mixed-use development, densities would also be up to 100 units to the acre, but the height in this particular zone is allowed to go up to 200 feet. And this was the direction that council provided back in the South Glendale Community Plan hearing. So this particular zone would definitely show an increase in overall height.
And as analyzed in the South Glendale Community Plan final EIR that was certified by the City Council and challenged and defended through the California Supreme Court, where a review of those approvals was rejected.
Thank you. There's my next. I believe, there we are. Okay. The two images that you see before you on the screen would be essentially the same type of use table and the same type of development table used currently in our zoning code. And this would be, this is for the seamless transition or input into our zoning code. The type of use table would be based on the existing uses that are currently in the C3, SFMU, IMUR, so the uses would be consistent as the underlying zone, and this would be for the TOD1. And then in the TOD2, however, the uses would focus on hospital uses. So it is primarily geared toward hospital and compatible uses to the hospital primary use. The table on the right would be a similar format that's used in the residential multifamily, mixed use and commercial use table, identifying the various density limits, heights, setbacks, landscaping and whatnot. Again, we're going back to the maximum densities, essentially the same TOD1 and TOD2 having a maximum density of 100 units to the acre, and the height being the most salient portion, point, meaning 60 feet in TOD1 and 200 feet in TOD2 as based on council's direction. Now we get to the objective design standards. So these standards are based on the downtown specific plan and on the city's comprehensive design guidelines. So the city has design guidelines for multifamily, commercial, and mixed use. However, these are guidelines and they are not objective design standards, and now we are embedding the objective design standards in our zoning code. We're using the same type of format. There are 3 parts. We have site planning, which is to promote the pedestrian-oriented public realms, open space, and screening of parking. We have massing and scale standards. These would be to reduce the massing and encourage human scale design. And this would be especially important for the high-density residential and commercial projects adjacent to the transit center and the bus lines and the existing developments in the Tropico area. And last but not least, the architectural elements, and this would be to encourage high quality design throughout using materials and articulation. The site planning is broken down into 4 primary features. One is the pedestrian realm. This is really important because in transit-oriented development, you want to make sure that people have a great walking environment. And this was also very much of an emphasized point by City Council. We want wider sidewalks, we want street trees and sidewalk widths, and then there's also a building adjacent zone. So this is a little bit different than what we have in our other zoning code chapters, which typically have, we have a setback from our front property line to the building frontage. Well, in this case, it's actually measured from the curb face to the building wall. So you'll notice here, this is a map. I want to just go back, but the previous slide actually had a cross section showing what the various dimensions for the actual public realm. The public realm, this map shows that on the wider streets, where it's more appropriate to have wider sidewalks because that's where you're going to see most of the pedestrian walking and the retail on the ground floor, you'll have a 15-foot, what's called a curb face to property line dimension. On the narrower streets that have shorter lot widths and dimensions, you'll have a 12-foot setback from the curb face to the building wall. And again, this public realm dimension would be a parkway zone that's a minimum of 4 to 5 feet, depending on which street you're located on. A sidewalk, which is a minimum 6 foot, which is definitely, a comfortable width for 2 pedestrians walking down. And then the building adjacent zone, which would either typically be featuring landscaping or some sort of a public amenity. Next up under site planning would be building setbacks. And again, this would be dependent on whether or not it's at grade and whether or not it's a residential or a non-residential. So we'll note that the residential portions, they're depending on if it's residential or if it's commercial, you'll note that the residential has more of a setback and the commercial can go closer to the actual, what we call the build-to line. And there's a term in that as well. Next up would be publicly accessible open space. Currently, this area does not have any publicly accessible open space requirements, so this would be a new feature in our zoning code for lots that have, and this would only apply for lots with a minimum width of 60 feet. If you're a narrower site, this would not apply, and so we don't penalize the smaller lots. Those that are 60 feet and wide, again, a 10% minimum lot area. This could go towards a courtyard or towards an interior courtyard, a corner courtyard, or a paseo. And for lots that are much larger, there would be a 15% requirement. Last but not least, parking. How do we screen it? Because we don't want the parking being the main focus if this is supposed to be a pedestrian-oriented, walkable environment. So the standards actually place the parking, which can be at grade, within the building envelope, and then you screen it with active uses. If there is an existing alley, the parking is to be taken off the alley, such as in this diagram. And if there is no alley, there are standards as to where you can access and provide driveways so that you don't have the driveways cutting up the pedestrian experience. Next, larger section after site planning would be massing and scale. Again, there are objective design standards. First one being modulation of height. Because you're going to have most of these buildings at 60 feet, except for the 200 in the TOD1 zone, the standards include an upper floor setback, and this would to sort of grant additional relief at the upper setback, which would be a minimum average of 6 feet. So it's not dictated that every building is going to have a 6-foot minimum step back at the upper floor, but that the developers have, or the architects have the option of then going ahead and sort of creating more of an undulation at the upper floors. And there would be no step back required if a building is less than 50 feet or if a building is adjacent to the publicly accessible open space. Next up would be facade modulation. How is the building articulated across the facade, both on a horizontal plane and then on a vertical plane? So the vertical modulation would require a tripartite, so you'd have a distinction between at the base, the middle, and the top. Then if you also, when it comes to horizontal modulation, you would first have a street-facing horizontal modulation so that there would be some sort of breaks along the building plane at a minimum, and this would be street-facing facades greater than 60 feet in length, and this would apply, again, only apply to buildings greater than 60 feet in length. If you're on a 50-foot wide lot, this does not apply to you, but if you're greater than 60 feet in width, that is, you have to have at least 30% of the elevation offset by a minimum of 24 inches. So again, to provide that undulation across the facade and not to have a solid blank wall to break down the massing. If the building is greater than 225 square feet, or 225 linear feet, correction, 225 linear feet, then the building has to have an additional building separation, which would be the minimum width and depth of 10%. So, for example, if the building is 300 linear feet in width, they would have to have a building separation that's 30 feet wide by 30 feet deep. So it really creates, it doesn't have this long unified building mass, it creates a break in separation. Next up would be the interior horizontal facade modulations. We want to make sure that the corners are wrapped and articulated. So, and then that interior elevations would not have unbroken solid wall planes as well. So there are development standards for that. And last but not least, that if at two street intersections, that there be some sort of unique corner feature to sort of address the intersection as well, and whether it be through height or some sort of design modulation or feature, that it provides a focal point for the building at a street intersection. The third major section, again, under objective design standards, would be the architectural elements. So many of these are actually based on architectural elements and design features in our downtown specific plans, and this would be related to materials and building entries, corners, canopies, awnings, balconies, fenestration, the list goes on and on. We have two new subsections. One would be the storefront transparency section, which would regulate ground floor window standards for non-residential uses. So we want to make sure that if you're going to have a commercial storefront along one of the major streets, such as San Fernando Road or Central Avenue, that it definitely be articulated, that you have transparency, that have awnings, and so again, we're trying to emphasize that walkable pedestrian experience at the street level. The other new subsection would be building entries and lobbies, and again, this would include locational and design standards. The last larger section in the chapter would be open space and landscaping. So these are building upon the open space requirements that are in the two underlying zones, in the IMUR and the SFMU zone, which for residential and mixed-use developments, while also incorporating the objective design standards featured in the DSP for the open space section. So the first subsection would be the publicly accessible open space standards. So again, in the site planning, we've already addressed that, yes, if you are a certain width, and if you are a certain size of lot, you're going to have to provide publicly accessible open space. Well, this subsection then goes ahead and speaks to the actual design standards themselves. It would be similar design standards for publicly accessible open space courtyards and paseos as in the DSP. So there's a number of street trees or trees required, active furniture, landscaping, paving, things along those lines. The next item would be under residential open space standards. So each and every individual unit for development would require the same open space provisions as in the current SFMU and IMUR zone. So that's 140 square feet per unit. It can be provided whether it's common, whether in the form of an additional courtyard or a rooftop deck amenity, or it can be provided in terms of a private balcony or a private patio. So there is a little bit more flexibility for the applicants and the architects to provide that residential open space requirement. And again, these standards would be very similar to the DSP, so that to ensure, that the patios are usable patios, that they have a minimum of 40 square feet. It's not just the Juliet balconies that get counted, and that the rooftop decks and the additional courtyards are usable active recreation areas. Okay, forgive me. And the mouse is a little bit, apologies. Okay. During the September presentation to City Council last year, question was raised, what about possibly reducing the unit sizes? Right now, the city's existing minimum unit sizes are 600 square feet for a studio or one bedroom. 2 bedrooms are 800 square feet. 3 bedrooms or more are minimum 1,000 square feet. And for seniors, it is 540 square feet. If the council wishes to address this at this time, a couple options. I mean, council has the option of either maintaining the existing minimum unit sizes or reducing the minimum unit sizes. A couple options would be to reduce each minimum size by 100 square feet, or consider perhaps a 20% deviation, which right now the city has an administrative exception process which allows for a 20% deviation from code. There are required findings, but it does not require a hearing. It's like a mini variance. So if again, this might be something that the Planning Commission would like to discuss and to give feedback to City Council whether or not you feel they should maintain the existing minimum unit sizes, reduce the minimum unit sizes, 100 square feet, 20%, or eliminate the minimums altogether. Now, any density bonus project, and we're assuming that density bonus projects will happen in the tropical area. We have a number of affordable housing projects already. Based on the level of affordability, they get additional incentives and waivers, whether it's for height, whether it's for open space, whether it's for unit sizes. So many of these projects, if they're going to be mixed use, they can utilize the density bonus process and there is an inclusionary housing requirement as well, thereby, they can apply for the density bonus projects, which would allow them to reduce the unit sizes in their projects. Option 3, eliminating the minimum unit sizes altogether could allow for micro units, and this would be down to as small as 190 square feet. And this would be consistent with the California Building Code, section 1208.4. And currently, our neighboring cities, Pasadena and Burbank, do not have minimum unit sizes in their zoning code. So it's not unusual to not have a minimum unit sizes, but and even with the elimination of the minimum unit sizes, the applicable density standards would apply. So you would be limited 100 units to the acre. So if you decide to do these micro units, unfortunately, your building is not going to be as big as it would be because the density standards would regulate that. And it would be up to the developer in the market to determine the sizes of the units in each project. However, this would be a significant policy change, and staff recommends that if council would like to eliminate unit sizes altogether, that council first move forward with a reduction in the unit size minimums for Tropico and request that staff bring back a detailed analysis of unit sizes for Tropico. And so depending on council's direction, we can then relay it. So again, this would be something that perhaps the Planning Commission can provide feedback to the City Council at this time. Last but not least, we have miscellaneous zoning code amendments. This would be such as for GMC 30.10.010, which would then include under the list of zones, it would include the new TOD zone. Under site planning, the TOD zone would be added to the various subsections for fences and walls, rooftop equipment, trash collection areas, and lighting under site planning. We would update the landscaping code to include TOD zone so that the state's model water efficiency landscape ordinance, the MWELO, would apply, and that the standard artificial turf regulations would apply to the TOD zone as well. Updates to the parking and loading, which I'm actually going to provide a little bit more detail on the next slide. Under signs, again, this would include TOD so that you would actually be able to have wall signs and projection signs and whatnot. We also are proposing to have the TOD signage match the types of identification signs, accessory wall signs for residential leasing offices, and projecting signs as permitted in the DSP. So it would be a little bit more generous in terms of signage than you would throughout the rest of the city, but it would match those allowed for the DSP. And obviously signs for hospitals is permitted in the MS zones and other areas. And last would be the standards for specific uses, because we would need to update the live work unit standards and then the mixed use development standards to include the new TOD zoning. In terms of the updates to the parking chapter, we are proposing to allow at-grade parking for residential uses. And this would obviously be in conjunction with the new parking screening requirements for the TOD chapter. So the parking at grade would not be visible from the street. It would be behind the building. But currently, the zoning code requires that all residential parking be semi-subterranean or subterranean. So this would be quite a change for the Tropico area. We would also like to see that tandem parking be allowed, similar to the DSP, which right now tandem parking is only permitted in the DSP. We would also modify the residential ratios to match those in the DSP as opposed to citywide, so which would be a decrease in the required number of parking spaces per unit, and that the larger projects comply with the same trip reduction and travel demand measures in the DSP as well. So since this is a transit-oriented development, that, it definitely be focused on reducing the parking requirement in this area and ensuring that trip reduction measures be in place. And again, all of this would be in order to incentivize development for transit-oriented projects adjacent to the existing mass transit, such as in the transit center and the bus lines in the TO district, and thereby also reducing the costly impediments towards multifamily and mixed-use development. Staff prepared an addendum. Again, as Ms. Van Meiden mentioned, the South Glendale Community Plan had a final program EIR that was certified by City Council and upheld in the court systems. So that is in place. So this addendum contained the required substantial evidence that demonstrated that this particular project, meaning the 3 different amendments, do not contain any substantial changes to the South Glendale Community Plan and the Tropico Center Plan that will cause new significant effects or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified significant effects in the final EIR. Does not contain any that there's a substantial change in the circumstances that will cause new significant effects or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified significant effects in the final program EIR, or that substantial new information that could not have been known at the time of the final EIR was certified that will cause new significant effects or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified significant effects. Okay, so again, no new significant impacts in the environmental areas were identified, nor would any impacts in any environmental area be made substantially worse as a result of implementing these amendments. Thus, no new environmental analysis is required, and so that addendum was part of your staff report packet. With that, we look to the Planning Commission to provide comments and direction regarding the proposed general land use map, zoning map, and zoning text amendments for Tropico for Council's consideration. That was a very, I apologize, I think we got a little too detailed in the staff presentation, but the staff report itself is much more detailed, and you have a number of exhibits. But I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or provide any clarification you might need.
Thank you very much. We'll start with, who wants to start? Okay.
I can start. I first want to say thank you to staff. I know this is not easy. It's a lot of work that's you guys have gone through to put this together. Thank you. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate all what you've done. This is exciting. I'm glad Glendale is entering the 21st century.
Yes.
So this is exciting. There were a few questions I had. I was just curious. Everything was just so well prepared, and I think we might be doing the minimum unit size discussion if everyone is up for it. But my question was about the parking section, and I was just curious to know if there was a specific reason why we decided to go with at-grade for this, for this COD zone, as we previously had, subterranean options. So just curious to know what the reasoning behind that was.
Yes, Commissioner Shabazian, Planning Commissioners. We kept hearing from developers that twofold, okay? One, as long as the parking was screened behind active uses, you really can't tell that the parking is there. We do limit the amount of parking, depending on the lot size, you're either looking at 60% or 80% of the ground floor that can be utilized towards parking. So it would not, definitely not be 100% at the ground floor. It would be screened by active uses, so you would not be able to tell that the parking is there. We also, there was a concern with the land cost, and if you are building affordable housing, you know, every level that you go lower is much more expensive, and it's an impediment to building affordable housing. And so in this case, because we're trying to incentivize dense housing adjacent to transit, whether it be the transit center or the bus lines, we felt also that requiring semi-subterranean might be much more of an impediment to building the housing where it really should be placed in the city.
Thank you for that. If anyone has questions about that, you guys can go ahead, because I have other comments that I'm going to make.
Keep going.
Okay. So, and I know that you mentioned, you know, we were trying to look at certain average vehicular ridership for the area. Do we have a number we're looking at for this area, or that's just, you know, or do we have a goal that we've set that we're trying to achieve? Especially since this is going to be a transit-oriented development. Are we going to be putting any kind of transportation demand management, TDM, you know, policies or regulations that we're going to, you know, talk to sites to, let's say, incentivize the use of the Metrolink or the metro, the rail system right there, or the buses. Just curious to hear that.
Yes, Commissioner, again, Shabazian, we are including as part of the parking amendments, the travel demand measures. And so if given of a certain size, you're going to have to provide tokens or bus, and forgive me, I don't have it off the top of my head, but you know, there are a list of transportation and travel demand measures that would apply for larger scale projects that would incentivize the use of the buses and the trains and whatnot. So it would hopefully reduce the level of vehicles, and especially vehicles miles traveled, which is the right now the gauge and the regulating factor, because you're specifically proposing high-density residential in areas that have access to transit or that are located, you know, we're hoping that individuals that work at the hospitals, that it become this focus point, you know, that there are areas that specifically are geared toward making sure walkable areas to bus, to transit, to job working, to, you know, grocery stores and other type of service amenities that would reduce the use of vehicles.
Thank you. And these are going to be mandated, correct? So when let's say a project has been set, it's going to be a mandate, or it's going to be part of the condition of approval of that project?
Yes, it is. And I can find that location for you. So if you go to pages 71 of the Exhibit 3, the draft ordinance amending Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code for Tropico. Under page 71, section 13, we specifically include additional trip reductions and travel demand measures in the DSP and the TOD zones. So depending, again, on the level, whether you're a Tier 1, a Tier 2, or a Tier 3 project, you would have additional requirements. So those would be surveys and additional bicycle facilities, programs such as designated on-site transportation coordinator, providing information boards and kiosks to prominent locations for, you know, all modes of transportation, and monitoring of those as well. So
Thank you. Thank you. So you said 70?
on page 71,
13.
71, through 75.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you answered my questions. The only thing I would say, in an ideal world, I wish we could have made the sidewalks bigger, but I know we don't have unlimited room to do that. And I understand the concern of what you explained for the not having the subterranean parking. Having the city desirable for developers to do affordable housing is very important. So I understand that. So thank you for explaining that. I don't have any questions, and I'll let others go through, and then we can talk
you.
about the unit sizes.
Okay, who
Thank
would
you.
like to go next?
I guess I could talk about the minimum size requirement.
Go ahead.
You know, we have housing shortages everywhere, and then we're also talking about homeless issues and affordable housing. Yet, you know, the housing, even with the affordable housing elements and incentives that we give out, the market rate of this housing is such that people cannot afford to move in to this new housing. So my opinion is that, you know, if you have more of this micro sizes units, I think people will be able to afford to move into this housing. So my recommendation is, I don't know if this is as a group or as an individual, but my opinion is that we should really remove the minimum requirements of these unit sizes.
Okay. Sounds good.
I have
Commissioner
a,
Menashe?
yeah, I have a follow-up question for Commissioner Chang. The minimum square footage that we mentioned, right now, it's 600 for studios and 1 bedroom, 800 for 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1,000. And the other option 1 is to reduce it by 20%. Option 3 is to eliminate the minimum square footage. Or yeah, there was option number 3 as well.
Correct. Commissioner Manassian. So the three options, as noted actually on the screen, which I brought up the slide itself, would be to maintain the existing minimum unit sizes, to reduce the minimum unit sizes, and again, this would be up for a discussion, and there were just, you know, 2 possibilities that we threw out. I'm sure that there are a number of other possibilities that can be considered. And the third one would be to eliminate unit sizes altogether.
My question, sorry to interrupt you. My question is that you mentioned that the maximum on 100 DUAC, we can't build more than that. Even if you reduce this, what's the point of reducing the square footage, living square footage, if you can't have more units?
Correct. Now, the caveat in this case would be that density is regulated by dwelling units per acre. In the downtown, in the DSP, which is a specific plan, density is not regulated by dwelling units per acre, which would be a standard norm. We have all our multifamily residential project, zones that are regulated dwelling units to the acre. We have dwelling units to the acre also in our commercial zones that are de facto to the R1250 standards. It's only in the downtown specific plan do we regulate density by floor area ratios. So the floor area ratio basically regulates the massing, the volume of the building. So it's a little bit of a distinction whether you're going to regulate density by floor area ratios or whether we're going to regulate density by the dwelling units per acre. And the direction that we've proceeded, because of the existing zoning, the existing underlying zoning, the C3 zoning, the IMUR, the IMU, the SFMU, all of the existing zoning right now is regulated by dwelling units to the acre. That might be something to consider in the future when we're looking actually at, right now, this Tropico area is basically a precursor of what is to come, because we are also going to be looking at objective design standards for multifamily. and objective design standards for commercial. Because right now, our commercial regulations are such in the C3 zones, which, you know, Tropico has a number of C3 zone lots, that actually are required to meet the R1250 standards, which have been proven time and time again. It's nearly impossible to do a mixed-use development in a C3 zone because you just can't make the standards without a number of variances. So we're also going to be addressing at that point. Perhaps what we can do is take your comments and say that, yes, we should be looking at micro units, and yes, you know, let's look at possibly raising the density. But that maybe that would be something to consider as we go along, and that we can then move, you know, and to provide it elsewhere. We can definitely take back your comments to City Council at this point in time.
Okay.
But again, you know, that would be a consideration to perhaps in the future look at floor area ratios as opposed to dwelling units.
One more
by
question, if you want.
Go ahead.
Okay. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned about the hospital zoning, that there was a correction must be pointed out regarding the land use designation for Glendale Memorial Hospital and bordered by Los Feliz and North Central. So is that something that it's already been
Correct. That's already actually been analyzed, and that was if you go to page, I'm going to refer to your packet under, yes, thank you. On page 6 of the staff report,
okay?
the first full paragraph on the page, a correction must be pointed out regarding the land use designation for the Glendale Memorial Hospital and surrounding properties. And this would be those bordered by Los Feliz on the north, Central Avenue on the west, San Fernando Road on the southwest, and Cerritos Avenue on the south, and alley parallel to Brand Boulevard on the east. These properties were identified in the South Glendale Community Plan maps as having a land use designation of public, semi-public, when in fact, the area was previously designated as community services commercial as per resolution number 12-09 adopted on January 24th, 2012, as part of the repeal of the South Brand Boulevard specific plan. So if you'll notice on the project site here, okay, this essentially, I apologize, so again, this would be the area just in this location that was previously shown as public, semi-public erroneously, because it is actually commercial services under our general plan land use map.
One last question,
Yeah,
if you don't
last
mind.
Go ahead, keep going.
Who owns these properties right now that we're trying to change the zoning? Is it public owned or city owned, or, you know?
These are all privately owned, most of these are privately owned properties, correct? Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I am just going to say I'm very excited about this project. I'd like to see it really come, through. And just like what you said, we're moving into the 21st century. I think it's going to revitalize and bring more vitality to the southernmost end of the city. I'm just happy that it's consistent with the general plan. And whether we go with reduced or elimination of the minimum square footage, there are other design standards that are going to kick in, like the floor area ratio, the 100 allowable units per acre. So I'm not really much into eliminating or reducing, but I'll go with whatever the majority of you think will be the best recommendation to the city council.
So I guess my question is that, is it individual recommendations or is it group as a planning?
They,
Yes, Commissioner Lee, we would be more than happy to go ahead and take individual as well, so it does not have to be as a group. I would also like to point out that the comment with regards to density units per acre, right now, the South Glendale Community Plan Final Program EIR only analyzed this particular area at 100 units to the acre. So that is also another reason why we're moving forward with the 100 units to the acre. If we were to consider increasing or providing that recommendation to City Council, unfortunately, I'm not sure what that would mean to, I mean, our addendum obviously would have to be relooked at, and I'm not sure how this South, I mean, this was a program EIR that was certified by City Council. I'm not sure how that would,
Yes.
I can describe
Jillian can do a great job at
what
this.
may happen.
Yes.
Members of the commission, we would take a look at the potential impacts of a modification to using FAR or another increase, and to determine whether or not it would have a significant effect.
impact.
So the determination would be made whether that it's a minor technical change that in terms of the policy and the plans, it would have a significant effect, and an additional environmental review beyond an addendum, just noting essentially for the record a minor technical change. So that what would the form of that be? I mean, that could be the form of a negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration. It could be a subsequent environmental impact report. We just have to almost do an initial study on it again and take a look at that time and what those impacts would be. It's possible to be done, but there would be an additional step in that process to accomplish it. And another point that I wanted to note is that in the comprehensive update to the land use element of the general plan, there will be environmental review associated with that. So it could be folded into that more comprehensive environmental analysis at that time.
Ms. Van Muden, may I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Yes. What you explained would happen if we were to, say, floor area, let's switch it to a floor area ratio rather than what it is now. Did I understand correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are we on some kind of a time frame limit or something? Is the council expecting
Fuentes?
this to go
Well,
back to them? Yeah.
Right now, we are tentatively scheduled to go to City Council on September the 19th.
Okay.
The Tropico zoning and objective standards are tied with an SB2 grant that expires
We
this
don't want to
year.
lose that.
So,
Okay.
I can
There's a little bit.
just tell you what my concern is. Commissioner Changi was very correct with shortage of housing. We need housing. But what worries me is having some luxury units that are going to go up, and people will actually not be able to afford them because they're going to be expensive, and they're going to be this very small units that are almost not going to be much usable. But again, at the same time, depending on type of project, for example, if we have an affordable housing where they can get a density bonus, you said the minimum has to be a certain amount. I'm not sure that you were shaking your head. So I'm assuming the answer is no, if they can't go below that minimum of the state regulation. You said 190 square feet, right?
Commissioner Chabazian, so my comment was the fact that the density bonus projects would be able to apply for an incentive or waiver for the minimum unit sizes. So we have had a number from our code. So it'd basically be a request to deviate from the minimum unit sizes. They would be able to go lower.
Okay, but not lower than what the state regulation of
That's
100.
correct. We'd be preempted by
Not
this.
low, correct.
Yeah,
Not lower than 190 square feet, which is the building code.
Okay,
Yes.
I got it.
Yes.
Thank you. So I guess my only worry would be, are we having affordable housing or are we having luxury homes or apartments where, we are going to allow the developers to build as much as possible, but it's going to make it difficult actually for people to rent $3,000, $4,000 a month. So there is ups and there's downs. I know council likes to look at neighboring cities always to kind of look at examples of how they've done. And I hear that you're saying both Burbank and Pasadena don't have those regulations. They have no minimum unit size. So for me, it's a bit difficult to make that decision. But if there is any comments that my colleagues have here, I'm open to hear, and we can agree, or we can set a comment that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a follow-up comment on that, and that is, I think if you give developer a little bit more freedom for them to exercise, instead of us forcing up on what the minimum sizes are, then they can do the pencil out and to see if the project makes sense, and be able to provide housing that is, as you said, these days, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom in a nice, the building costs $3,000, $3,500. It's ridiculous. So the people who cannot afford to rent, they're the being out on the street, and that number is increasing in LA and everywhere else. And I think the only way you can do that is if some developer really wants to develop something that could provide these people some housing, some respectable housing. I think if we do not, give any type of a regulation as to what that is, and leave it up to them to figure that out.
Thank you for that.
Sounds good.
I'm curious,
I was just going
Chairperson.
to ask them, what is it that you would like us to do, or?
Well, Commissioners, we would like to have comments, just in general. Do you or do you not recommend approval of the general plan land use map amendment? Do you or do you not recommend approval of the zoning map amendment? And do you or do you not recommend approval of the zoning text amendments, or if you have any comments? I think those would be the three primary, and then we would definitely take your feedback regarding the unit sizes. What I'm hearing is that you would like to ensure that the density limiting the dwelling units per acre doesn't prohibit affordable housing units that are smaller in size. But I just want to quickly clarify, the city has an inclusionary housing requirement that each project greater than 8 units must provide a minimum of 15% affordable housing units, okay?
Can we do 1 and then 2 and 3?
And so, yes,
separate, and then see where everyone is coming from.
correct, and then we can take, if you don't mind, thank you, Chair Fuentes. The three main items, the three main amendments, the general plan land use map, the zoning map, and then the zoning text. If you have any comments, and then we would definitely take your feedback to council as well regarding any other items that you'd like to point out.
Chairperson, I'm ready to make a motion on that if there are no questions.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Do we have a second?
I'll support it.
Okay, I'm going to read just so we have that. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Glendale recommending to the City Council to the adoption of amendment to the General Plan Land Use Map, case number PGPA 001746-2023, and Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995 Zoning Code Text Amendment, and Zoning Map, case number PZC 0007-2023, relating to the Tropico Transit-Oriented Development Zoning and Objective Design Standards project.
And
With
we have
all
a
the
second.
following
Yeah.
Second.
conditions.
Okay.
With comments.
Comments? Yes.
We're on tape anyway, so they can pick our comments back from there. Moved and seconded.
Are there any other additional comments beside the ones with regards to the unit sizes and perhaps the floor area ratio consideration for future amendments?
I think that's it.
I think, yeah, that was,
So
Just mention that, do we have any time frame how long this project is going to take?
How long?
Okay,
I'm
Commissioner,
sorry, if you don't
wanna
mind
turn
speaking
on
into the
your
microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, do we have any idea how long this project will take?
Well, these are a set of zoning amendments, and we will then take your recommendations and comments to City Council at the tentatively scheduled hearing on September the 19th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more? Roll call, please.
I'm so sorry to cut you. I apologize. Just for everyone, were we clear on the comments, or did you guys want them to be repeated back? We're
No,
good?
I think
Okay.
that, like I said,
All right.
we're on tape, so they can take them back. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Roll
Sorry
call.
about that.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Manassian,
Yes.
Commissioner Shabazian,
Yes.
and Chair Fuentes.
Yes.
And it's-
Okay, so
and res-
motion carried. Item 8, Community Development Department updates.
We do not have any.
Any pending cases for September? Nothing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
no.
So we are adjourned?
Second, so move.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
6:38 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No, and
6:38. Anything you need?
Yeah, we're watching the screen to see if it's going off.
Stay safe, Glendale.
Ever hear the one about the frog?